Today, a little girl ran up to a tycoon, begging and sobbing. "They took my little brother!" pointing toward a woman walking away with a toddler. When the businessman decided to intervene and help, a shocking secret came to light. Sit back and relax while you listen to this story. I sincerely hope this narration acts as a soothing balm, helping you drift into that much-needed deep sleep. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. And here we go. The heavy autumn rain drummed against the roof of the black Bentley parked on the edge of a lonely road. The street, which once led to an old amusement park, was now marked only by rusted signs, decaying carousels, and knee-high weeds. The sky was a leaden gray, and the wind howled eerily. There was no sound of children's laughter, only the smell of wet earth and the constant patter of rain, casting a chilling melancholy over everything. Inside the car, Alexander Sterling remained motionless, staring out the window. His eyes followed the trail of raindrops as they slid down the glass. His face was devoid of expression, though the hand resting on his thigh trembled slightly. At 55, he possessed everything most people only dreamed of: wealth, status, influence. But in that moment, he felt completely empty. "Alex," Carla's voice broke the silence, sweet but cold. The young woman beside him, meticulously made up with softly curled brunette hair, patted his shoulder gently. On her lap sat Ethan, Alexander's 2-year-old son with his late ex-wife. "I'm taking Ethan home first, Carla. You really should stay and deal with that girl's drama." Alexander tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Which girl are you referring to?" Carla didn't answer immediately. She simply jerked her chin toward the window. "Look outside." Outside, huddled on the side of the road in the pouring rain, was a little girl. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, her floral dress darkened by water, and her small hands clutched a torn teddy bear. Every gust of wind made her tiny body shiver violently. "Leah Solis," Carla declared, her voice hardening. "Elena's daughter." Alexander remained silent. That name still twisted something inside him. Elena, his first wife, the woman who had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him 2 children, Ethan, his biological son, and Leah, the little girl not related by blood, but who bore the same expressive eyes as her mother. "She is still my responsibility," Alexander said softly. Carla let out a short, sharp, mocking laugh. "Carla, your responsibility? How cute. How many times have you actually spoken to her since I moved in?" "Once, maybe twice." Alexander didn't respond. Carla opened her door, the rain instantly soaking the shoulder of her white coat. "That child is exhausting. She looks at me like I'm some kind of monster." "I can't stand being near her for another day." Alex. "Carla, don't exaggerate," he interrupted. "No, Alex, I'm done." She walked around to the back seat. She opened the door, buckled Ethan into his car seat, and slammed the door shut. "You can take care of your dead wife's stepdaughter all you want." "I won't." With that, Carla climbed into the silver SUV parked behind the Bentley and slammed her door with a dull thud. The engine roared to life, drowning out the sound of the rain. Alexander remained still, his face expressionless, but his eyes wavered slightly. In the rearview mirror, he watched Leah stumble to her feet in the rain. Her hand was raised as she screamed, "Mommy! Mommy, don't leave me." Carla didn't look back. The SUV's tires spun hard, kicking up streaks of brown mud before speeding off, leaving a thin cloud of exhaust. Leah ran after her, slipping and falling. Her knees were scraped and bleeding, but she kept screaming, "Mommy! Mommy!" Alexander gripped the armrest tightly. The chauffeur in the front seat looked at him through the rearview mirror, hesitating. "Sir, should I?" "No," Alexander interrupted. His voice was hoarse. "Just wait." But he couldn't stay still for long. A sudden sound pierced the constant drumming of the rain, a sharp, terrified shriek. "Please help me. They took my brother." Alexander shot up, his heart pounding. He pushed the car door open and stepped out, the wind slapping harshly against his face. The chauffeur yelled, "Mr. Sterling, where are you going?" But he heard nothing over the desperate cries of the child. Leah stumbled toward him. Rainwater mixed with tears on her face, the teddy bear abandoned behind her. Alexander leaned down, kneeling on the cold pavement, and placed his heavy coat over her small shoulders. "What did you say?" "Who took your brother?" The girl sobbed, her lips turning blue. "A silver car. They took Ethan, my mom. She left with them." Alexander froze. "Carla." Leah felt the rain dripping from her chin, her voice choked. "I ran after them, but they locked the door." "Leah, they drove away." He placed both hands firmly on her shoulders, his voice deepening. "Look at me, Leah. Do you remember the license plate?" "Anything else?" Yes. I only saw a sticker on the back window." It had a skull with blue eyes. Alexander narrowed his eyes. He had seen that symbol somewhere before, used by groups specializing in heavy-handed debt collection. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "Okay, calm down. I'm going to find your brother. You promise?" asked Leah, her voice trembling. Her eyes were wide with desperate pleading. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at the girl, seeing in her wet eyes the reflection of Elena, the woman he had loved, who had taught him that saving a child is saving the entire world. He squeezed Leah's shoulder gently. "I promise." Then he picked her up. Her small body was freezing, and her hands clutched his neck tightly. The chauffeur quickly opened the door, looking alarmed. "Mr. Sterling, what is happening?" Alexander gave a concise order. "We're leaving. Call James. Tell him I need to meet him immediately." "Tell him what, sir?" "Just do it," snapped Alexander, his voice cutting. For the first time in years, the Bentley roared to life, tires splashing through the water. Through the rear window, Leah watched the red taillights of Carla's SUV fade around a distant curve. "Uncle. Uncle," she whispered, her voice tense. "I'm scared." Alexander stroked her wet, tangled hair. "It's okay, little one. Just breathe. I'm here now. It's okay." She buried her face in his shoulder. Her whole body was shivering. He felt her shallow, ragged breathing and the frantic beating of her little heart against his chest. She said, "Uncle, will Mom come back for me?" asked Leah, her voice lost amidst the sound of the rain. Alexander looked out the window where the shadow of the car had completely disappeared. He didn't know how to answer. Part of him wanted to lie to ease her pain, but another part felt he didn't deserve to offer such comfort. "But for now, you have to trust me. We're going to find Ethan. And then everything will be different." Leah looked at him, her eyes full of tears, but said nothing more. The car turned onto the main highway. The rain grew heavier. Headlights reflecting on the wet asphalt stretched out like long, painful streaks. Alexander sat still, one arm around the girl, the other clutching his phone. He knew that from this moment on, he was no longer a spectator in the distance. The taillights of Carla's SUV flickered faintly before disappearing completely. After the curve, Alexander didn't take his eyes off the spot until only darkness and the sound of rain remained. Alexander pulled Leah closer, his thick coat wrapping around both of them. She pressed her face against his chest and whispered weakly, "You won't leave me behind, right?" Alexander answered softly, his voice determined. "No way. I've already lost too much." The Bentley rolled silently, its shadow swallowed by the murky curtain of rain. The yellow light at the gate of the Sterling estate shone down. It shimmered on the slippery driveway, reflecting off the gray stone walls and the tightly shut windows that looked like cold eyes watching their approach. The mansion was isolated on the outskirts of Riverton, where the wind through the ancient trees sounded like distant whispers. Alexander got out of the car, his dark coat damp. He walked over to open the door for Leah. She hesitated for a second before stepping onto the cold stone path, her small shoes covered in mud. Her dress was soaked. The rain hit her face, and the cold wind made her shiver. Alexander leaned down gently, covered her shoulders with his coat, and pushed open the main door. The mahogany door opened inward, releasing a gust of freezing air that carried the scent of old wood and extinguished candles. The grand hall was vast, with a high ceiling dominated by a massive crystal chandelier. Its white light reflected on the polished stone floor. Everything was perfect, orderly but lifeless. There was no music, no laughter, no warmth. Just the sound of the rain hitting the window panes like a soft tapping in the void of the house. Martha, the gray-haired housekeeper, hurried out from the hallway. She stopped dead when she saw Leah. "Sir, this child is—" "Prepare a room for her," said Alexander, his voice even but not impolite. "The one near the west garden." Martha paused, looking uncertain. "Sir, Mrs. Carla won't be pleased." Alexander took off his coat. He hung it on the rack, and his eyes darkened. "Carla isn't coming back tonight." Martha looked at him for a second longer, then bowed slightly. "Yes, sir." Leah stood frozen in the middle of the foyer. The light from the crystal chandelier reflected in her wet eyes, making them shine like a winter lake. She looked around, afraid to move. Everything in this house was chillingly pristine, the perfectly aligned paintings, the dust-free crystal vases, and the curved staircase ascending to the second floor, leading to an unknown space. Martha returned with a towel and a cup of hot milk. She leaned down, her voice softening. "Here, here. Drink this, child. You're freezing." Leah took the cup, her small hands wrapping around it, letting the warmth spread slowly. The housekeeper looked at Alexander. "Sir, if I may ask, who is this child to you?" Alexander paused. It took him a moment to answer. "My daughter." No one spoke again. Martha simply nodded slightly, her eyes seeming to understand more than he had said. After a bath, Leah wore a white nightgown that Martha found in an old closet. She sat by the living room window, looking out at the rain-soaked garden. Outside, small lights cast lonely yellow glows on the wet grass. She asked softly, her voice trembling, "Uncle Alex, son, will Mom come back for me?" Alexander was nearby, staring at the glass of whiskey in his hand, the amber liquid swirling. He didn't answer immediately. His mind wandered to the past. The image of Elena, the woman with golden hair and a kind smile. The day he brought Leah home from the hospital in a storm very much like today. A year later, an accident took her life. He thought that by marrying Carla he could fill the void, but the moment Leah looked at him with eyes identical to her mother's, Alexander realized he had never really forgotten. He set the glass down, his voice hoarse. "You should rest. Everything will be fine." A while later, the police arrived. 2 officers asked a few questions. Carla's name, the license plate, the direction she drove. Alexander answered briefly, his voice tightening with every word. When they left, he stood in silence watching the door close, a heavy weight on his heart. They said they would be in touch if they heard anything, but he knew that was just a polite way to end the conversation. Night fell. The rain continued to pour, the wind whipping against the window frames creating a mournful sound. The vast mansion was swallowed by silence, broken only by the constant tick-tock of the grandfather clock, marking the time of a lonely life. Leah lay in the oversized bed with her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't used to this silence. It reminded her of the emptiness after one of her stepmother's fits of rage. Unable to sleep, she slipped out of bed, walking barefoot down the long hallway. Her small steps echoed in the vast, almost disorienting space. At the end of the hall, a faint light escaped through a crack in the door. The library. She gently pushed the door open. Alexander was sitting in a leather chair by a dim yellow table lamp. In his hands, he held an old photograph, a woman smiling in a sunny garden. His hand trembled slightly as his finger grazed the face in the picture. Leah spoke softly. "I'm sorry to bother you." Alexander startled, looking up. For a moment, he thought he was seeing a young Elena, those eyes of the same color, the same gentle but sad gaze. Leah. Hi. "It's okay," he said quietly, gently folding the photograph. you're safe here." Leah walked in and sat on the chair opposite him. She said nothing else. Just watched the small dying fire in the fireplace. The warmth stopped her small shoulders from shivering. After a while, her head dropped, and her breathing became steady. Alexander watched her sleep, her face still bearing traces of tears, her wet lashes fluttering. He got up, took a thin blanket from the chair, and placed it gently over her shoulders. As his hand touched her soft wet hair, an unfamiliar sensation washed over him, a warmth, small but real. A deep part of his heart stirred like a gentle breeze crossing a calm lake. He turned away, standing by the window. Outside, the rain kept falling in murky curtains. A flash of light illuminated the soaked garden and the long driveway leading to the iron gate. His eyes stopped when he noticed something unusual. A red light blinking faintly in the distance, then stopping completely. The silver SUV. Alexander frowned slightly. The taillights reflected through the curtain of rain, casting a pale, blood-like streak on the stone wall. He froze, his gaze turning icy. Alexander. In a far corner of the grounds, in the shadows, the vehicle remained running. Inside, Carla sat behind the wheel, her hand holding her phone. The light from the screen illuminated her face, her lips pressed tight. She looked toward the brightly lit mansion, then lowered her head. Her fingers typing a message quickly. But inside the mansion, Alexander was still standing still, unaware that outside the gate, the shadow of the past was returning, bringing with it the true storm. Early in the morning, the fog still clung to the leaves as the iron gate of the mansion creaked open. Carla stepped out of the black SUV, her white dress impeccable despite the humidity, her hair neatly styled, her lipstick a vibrant red as if arriving at a gala. Her steps had a refined modesty, but her eyes couldn't hide a trace of contempt. Martha stopped arranging the tea tray. The housekeeper frowned at Carla, then looked at Alexander, who was standing by the entrance. He wore a slightly damp robe, his face serene, though his eyes betrayed his exhaustion from the night. "I'm here to pick up my daughter," Carla announced, her voice cloyingly sweet as she handed Ethan to a woman accompanying her. The boy was sleepy and disheveled, still unaware of what had happened. Alexander took a step forward without haste, resting his hand on the banister like someone measuring their steps. "The girl told me everything. You abandoned her in the rain, Carla." His statement was brief and unadorned, like throwing a stone onto a calm surface. Carla curled her lip as if amused. "You believe the testimony of a child? You always pride yourself on being rational, Alex. A little girl running around crying. Anyone would think she was trying to cause trouble." She turned her head to look at Leah, who was huddled behind a pillar with her eyes downcast, her small hands gripping her skirt. Leah tried to shrink further as if hoping to become invisible. Leah didn't speak. Every time Carla looked at her, the girl flinched, her lips paling from cold and fear. Then Alexander noticed her small hands shaking. He looked at Leah, then back at Carla. A deep, obvious chasm separated them. "Where is Ethan?" asked Alexander, his voice calm but cutting. Carla answered immediately. Feigning composure, she said, "At my mother's house. I'm taking both of them with me. You don't have to intervene." She moved to grab Leah, but Leah shuddered, unwilling to move. Alexander took a step forward, his hand gentle but firm enough to stop Carla. "Starting today, you no longer call this place home." His words were slow, not loud, but each one marked a new boundary. Carla flared up, her face turning crimson. "You're leaving me for that girl? A girl who isn't even your flesh and blood?" The statement hit Leah like cold water. She went rigid, her eyes widening. A tear fell, followed by another and another. Alexander closed his eyes for a second, then opened them, calmer but unyielding. "I am leaving you because I realized who truly needs protection." He looked up, his gaze meeting Carla's without blinking. Carla screeched, reaching for her phone, her fingers typing rapidly on the screen. "You'll regret this, Alex. I'll let the whole world know you kidnapped my son." She spoke as if she had prepared the dialogue, the cameras, and the social media campaign. It wasn't the first time she used noise to deflect. Alexander approached without haste and snatched the phone from her hand. "Not like this," he said briefly. He unlocked the screen. A new text message appeared. Black letters on a white background. "The boy is with us. If you want to see him again, do not alert the authorities." The message was from an unknown number. The dining room fell silent, and the old grandfather clock chimed. Martha let out a quiet breath, stepping back, her eyes darting between Carla and Leah, as if looking for an answer. Carla shuddered. Her composure failed momentarily, but she instantly suppressed her panic with a tense smile. "Someone is trying to scare me." "You should shut up, Alexander. Don't make a scene." "I won't shut up," replied Alexander, his voice chilling. He placed the phone on the table, his finger tapping the screen as if trying to force the reality of the text. Who sent this?" "They said us." "Who are they? What have you gotten yourself into, Carla?" Carla backed away, trying to keep calm, but her hands tightened around the strap of her purse. "I just owe money, Alex, just some business partners. You know, my ventures. They said if I didn't give them a time frame, they would cause trouble." She tried to breathe steadily, looking at Leah as if checking if she still had any leverage. Leah sat still on the small chair, wringing her hands. "Mom said she was taking him. I saw men in black jackets. They were in a rush. In the silver car." The girl spoke softly, every word like a brick falling. Somehow, her small voice carried more weight than the adults. Carla turned around as if trying to hide. "Alexander, I need the phone. The numbers, everything," Alexander said to James, whom he had called right after getting the news. James appeared now in the dining room entrance, his raincoat still wet, his face maintaining a look of composure developed over years of handling tense situations. "I will find them. Get out right now and stay somewhere people can see you. If you hide anything else, I will contact the police immediately." Carla let out a cynical laugh, but her eyes were wet. "Go ahead then. Who will believe a rich and hated man like you? People will think you're making up stories to gain public sympathy." She spoke as if she had rehearsed every line, but a tiny trace of fear, like a bee trapped in a bottle, slipped into her voice. Alexander placed the phone on the table. Looking deep into her eyes, "I won't resort to PR tricks. But today, I will handle this differently. I will bring my son home. I will find Ethan." He turned to Leah, his voice changing completely softer, with no need for concealment. "You will stay here with me. No one will take you." Leah came closer and rested her head against his arm, her eyes wet. "Will you really find Ethan, Uncle?" she whispered. Alexander put his hand on her head, gently stroking her hair. "I promise. I promise." Carla retreated, walking toward the door, her hands gripping her purse, shaking. Before getting into the car, she turned around, trying to connect with him. "Someday you'll regret not understanding me." Then she ran out, the engine starting, tires spraying water and mud across the courtyard. Alexander stood watching the car disappear behind the trees, his heart beating faster than usual, not purely from fear or anger, but from something broken inside him. Responsibility. Leah clung to his arm, her small warmth, seeping through like pinpricks. Immediately pushed aside all complex emotions. He grabbed the phone and called James. "Go out now. Listen to me. Find every camera in the area. The sender of the message, track it to the end." James nodded, his eyes wide, instantly grasping the gravity of the situation. "Give me the location." "I have contacts. I'm leaving now." He turned, his voice serious. "Don't say another word to the press." The door closed, leaving only the sound of rain hitting the eaves. Leah leaned against his leg, small and warm, her eyes wide as she looked at the wet courtyard. Alexander let out a long breath, his hand squeezing the car keys in his pocket. He knew this would drag him into a battle he had tried to avoid all his life. But when a child places their trust in you, choices ceased to be a luxury. He put on his coat and walked toward the hallway, his long shadow stretching under the light as he headed to the garage, where the Bentley was still parked. Before opening the door, he looked at Leah one last time, her eyes shining with fragile hope. Then he grabbed the door handle as if making an irreversible decision. Alexander held the key, opened the garage door, and got into the car. The phone on the dashboard vibrated, showing another message from the unknown number. Don't play the hero. Come to the old docks if you want to see the boy. The silence in the dining room was dense and palpable, but the phone screen still glowed, casting a cold light on Alexander's face. The text: "The boy is with us. If you want to see him again, do not alert the authorities." And so, still on the white background, but its weight felt heavy enough to freeze the air. Carla was stunned, her eyes wide. No way. They were just trying to scare me. Her voice was hoarse, but her trembling hands betrayed genuine panic. Alexander realized this wasn't an act. In her eyes, he saw true terror, something lies couldn't mimic. He slammed the phone onto the table, his palm crashing against the wood with a loud bang that startled everyone. "What have you done, Carla?" His voice was low, every word a prolonged drag. "Who is us?" Carla turned her face away, inhaling deeply as if trying to swallow her tremors. "I just owed money, Alex," she said. "Just some business people. I didn't think they would." Alexander stepped closer, his voice sharp as a razor. "Details. Who did you owe? How much?" "Around 300,000. I made some bad investments. They wanted me to leave Ethan with them for a few days, as collateral. I thought that was it, that I would settle the debt later." The last sentence was the final straw. Alexander slammed his hand on the table again. The reverberation made Leah shrink and cling tightly to Martha. The cup of milk fell, liquid spreading across the table, mixing with shards of broken glass. "You handed my son over to extortionists?" roared Alexander. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice squeezed through clenched teeth. Carla stepped back. Tears finally falling down her face. "You don't understand." "I didn't mean to. They all threatened to disappear me." Double quotes. "Disappear you?" interrupted Alexander, substituting the forbidden word. "You feared for your own life more than my son's?" No one answered. Only the sound of rain beating relentlessly against the window panes. Leah began to sob, her small hand clutching the hem of Martha's dress. In her wet eyes, she looked at Alexander not just with fear, but with a fragile belief. A belief that he would do the right thing. Alexander turned, giving concise orders. "Martha, prepare the car. Call James. We're going to track this signal." "Sir, what about Mrs. Carla?" "Leave her here," he said, his voice cold as steel. "If anything happens to Ethan, I will make sure she lives in hell every day of her life." "Alex!" Carla broke down crying, a mix of anger and terror. "If you call the police, they'll hurt him." "You don't understand these people, Alex. They want money, not lives. Don't do anything stupid." "No," Alexander stopped, looking directly at her. "The stupidity was thinking you could buy safety through betrayal." The phone vibrated again. Everyone's eyes went to the screen. A new message appeared. "Hello, if you want to see the boy again, 10 p.m., Old Dock Warehouses. Come alone." The air felt heavier than before. Martha covered her mouth, and Leah retreated toward the wall, her face pale. Alexander took the phone, reread every word, then tossed it to James, who had just entered, his coat still wet from the rain. "Help me get ready," said Alexander quickly. "But we aren't calling the police." James caught the phone, read the message, and frowned. "They're playing the classic game, docks, alone, rain, all signs of an ambush." "I know," replied Alexander calmly. "But I can't sit here and wait." "Alex, are you sure you can handle this?" James asked, keeping his voice low. 3 years ago, you couldn't even work up the courage to look at your daughter in the coffin." Alexander met his gaze, his eyes determined. "That is why I won't let history repeat itself." James nodded slightly, understanding that Alexander's words weren't meant to persuade. They were a solemn promise. Upstairs, Leah hid behind the banister, looking down. She saw Alexander open a cabinet and take out an old wooden box. When he lifted the lid, steel glinted in the dim light. A silver revolver left by Elena's father. Inside the box was also an old family photo. Alexander, Elena, and a baby Leah smiling in her mother's arms. He took the firearm, wiped off a layer of dust, and loaded the first round into the chamber. The quiet click resonated, reaching Leah's heart. But she didn't fully understand. She only knew this man was changing. He was no longer the one who sat passively behind a window. Martha shouted at him, "Mr. Sterling, please don't go alone." "Let me." "No," he interrupted. "Martha, keep the children here. Secure the doors. Do not open for anyone." Leah came down a few steps, her voice choked. "Uncle, can I go with you? I'm worried about my brother." Alexander stopped at the door, the rain hitting his face. He looked at the girl, his eyes a mixture of pain and determination. He stepped back, knelt, and put his hands on Leah's shoulders. "You have to stay. I will bring him back. I promise." The girl nodded, tears falling down her face. "Please don't get hurt, okay?" "I'll try." He offered a fleeting, kind smile, the first in years. Then he turned around. Outside, the rain still fell. James opened the garage door, the light reflecting on the chassis of the Bentley. Alexander put on a dark coat. His face was cold, but his eyes were different, full of life, full of purpose. He got into the car, and the door slammed shut. The Bentley drove out of the gate. Inside, the weapon from Elena's father lay next to the seat, the steel glinting as the car passed under the streetlights. On the porch, Leah watched through the window, her small hands pressed against the glass. His figure gradually faded into the rain. The man she once feared now carried her only hope. The rain intensified, swallowing the road in the distance. A thunderclap rumbled like a warning for the long night ahead. Alexander drove away from the mansion, the wind whipping the windows, the steel of the old weapon gleaming. The rain fell so intensely, it was like a gray curtain hanging over the south docks. Every drop beat fiercely on the rusted corrugated metal roofs, sliding down the edges of moss-covered shipping containers and splashing onto the cold ground. The sea wind roared, carrying the salty taste of the ocean and the smell of rusting metal. The deserted warehouse area was shrouded in weak yellow light, broken only by the sound of crashing waves and clinking chains. The black Bentley stopped at the edge of the dock. Alexander turned off the engine, took out the key, and sat still for a second. Listening to the rain beat against the car glass, the clock read 9:58 p.m., 2 minutes to go. He looked in the mirror, seeing his face in the dim light. Deep wrinkles, dark circles under his eyes, and a gaze he barely recognized. He opened the door and stepped out. The wind immediately lunged at him, pressing his coat firmly against his back. Every step on the concrete was heavy, water splashing from deep puddles. His hand gripped the firearm in his pocket. It was freezing. "Just me," he murmured, reminding himself. In the distance, headlights flashed. An old truck turned, its engine roaring loudly. 3 men in hooded jackets jumped out and walked directly toward him. The truck's lights shone directly into Alexander's face, forcing him to squint. A raspy voice, thick with the smell of cigarettes, resonated. "Mr. Sterling, right on time." The man in the middle sketched a thin smile. "Now just transfer the money and we all go home." Alexander forced himself to stay calm. "I want to see my son first." He spoke slowly, every word distinct. The man gestured. Another man opened the door of the nearby warehouse, the hinges squeaking loudly. Inside, in the dim light, sat an old wooden chair. Ethan was tied loosely to it, his head bowed. Alexander's heart shrank. He took a step forward, his voice choked. "Ethan!" "Stop right there." One of the 3 men raised his weapon. The metallic sound of the slide racking back was chillingly dry. "Where is the money?" Alexander raised both hands, keeping his voice steady. "Tell me how much you want. I'll pay it." "Don't hurt him." The gunman sneered. "That's none of your business, Alexander. Just hand over the money." From the distance, car headlights flashed twice. The signal. James was there, hiding with two other men among the shipping containers. They waited for the precise moment. Alexander took a deep breath. He knew any mistake could cost the boy his life. Suddenly, a small sound echoed from behind. The noise of a metal can being kicked, hitting the wall, and falling with a clatter into the water. The whole group turned instantly. "Who goes there?" shouted the gunman, swinging the weapon toward the source of the sound. Alexander froze, his heart skipping a beat when he saw a small figure hiding behind a container in the beam of the headlights. Her wet hair plastered to her forehead, her small hands trembling. "Leah!" "No!" shouted Alexander. "It's just me. Don't shoot." But it was too late. "Come out!" The gunman walked quickly, aiming the weapon directly at the container. "Come out!" "Who is it?" Leah trembled violently, stepping out of the darkness. Her face was revealed clearly under the headlights' terrified but determined eyes. Alexander acted on instinct. He lunged forward, striking the arm of the man holding the weapon hard to the side. The sound of the gunshot was deafening. The bullet grazed a wooden partition, splinters flying everywhere. Ethan woke up startled and burst into high-pitched sobs. "Ethan!" shouted Alexander. He swung his elbow, hitting the man hard in the chest. The man stumbled back, his weapon falling to the ground with a clatter. The other two rushed immediately. One grabbed Leah. The other pulled out a knife. "Run!" shouted Alexander, his voice lost in the rain. Then Leah struggled, biting hard on the hand of the man holding her. The man shrieked, letting her go, and the girl fell onto the slippery ground, rolling toward the back of a container. The man with the knife rushed toward Alexander, slashing horizontally. Alexander stepped back, swinging a wooden chair to block the attack. The wood shattered, but the blade still grazed his shoulder, leaving a reddish streak. Alexander counterattacked, punching the man hard in the jaw, making him stumble back. From the distance, James shouted, "Drop your weapons!" followed by consecutive shots. Flashlights swept erratically through the rain. James's two men surrounded and neutralized the third man. Ethan was still crying, only able to struggle slightly against his loose bonds. Then Alexander knelt, quickly cutting the ropes and pulling his son tightly against him. The boy sobbed uncontrollably, shaking. "Daddy, I'm scared." Alexander hugged his son, his hand trembling but his voice firm. "I'm here. No one will touch you again." Leah ran toward him, her face covered in rain and tears. "Uncle, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just worried you'd get hurt." Alexander looked at the girl, his gaze both stern and warm. "You don't have to apologize. You did what I should have done from the beginning. Never abandon who you care about." James approached, breathing heavily. "We controlled two of them. One escaped." He looked toward the dark dock. "He might be hiding in the lower warehouse. I'll send someone to check the area." Alexander nodded, his eyes fixed on the two children. "Take them back first. I'll talk to the officers later." "Alexander, you're losing blood," said James, putting a hand on his friend's shoulder. Alexander looked at the red streak, spreading on his coat, but managed only a slight smile. "It's nothing. Just a scratch." The rain continued to fall, washing the crimson streaks toward the drains, mixing with the dark sea. In the distance, the flashing lights of patrol cars began to appear. Alexander stood up, holding Ethan with one arm and pulling Leah close with the other. "Daddy!" The three stood in the downpour, their shadows merging in the flickering light. "Daddy!" whispered Ethan, his tiny voice. "Where is Mommy?" Alexander looked into the distance through the rain, where the red and blue police lights reflected on the water. He didn't answer immediately. All you need to know now is, I won't let anyone take you away again. Ethan buried his head in his shoulder, and Leah clung to the other side of his coat. In the heart of the storm, the man who once only cared about money now held two small lives tightly. As if they were the only possessions that truly mattered out far away in the shadows of the warehouse. A figure stood still, watching through a crack in the broken wooden door. The bright red glow of a cigarette shone briefly and then was extinguished. The figure took out a phone and sent a short text message. The plan failed. Sterling intervened. The sound of police sirens echoed, and the rain grew heavier. Alexander, holding Ethan and gripping Leah's hand, walked out of the ruined warehouse. Unaware that the real fight had just begun, the first shot sounded like thunder in the rain, tearing through the night. A flock of seagulls over the harbor frantically flapped their wings, rising into the air, their wings blurring into white streaks under the downpour. The scent of burnt gunpowder mixed with the salty air and rust, creating a heavy atmosphere that threatened to swallow the entire dock. Alexander crouched instinctively, throwing himself forward to protect Leah. "Run!" he shouted, his voice cracking. But the girl clung firmly to his hand, her voice choked by sobs. "I won't leave you." The rain lashed mercilessly at their faces. Then he tried to drag her toward the car, but it was too late. Another burst of shots rang out. James and his two men rushed from the side entrance, their shouts mixing with the heavy echoes of impacts in the empty warehouse. One of the attackers collapsed, his body falling into a puddle, the water quickly turning reddish. The remaining two pulled frantically at Ethan, the boy screaming and kicking, his cries lost in the rain. Alexander didn't hesitate. He charged forward, striking the man holding his son with a powerful punch, bloated with all his repressed anger and regret. The man stumbled back, falling to the ground and rolling into a pile of wooden crates. Alexander snatched Ethan, pulling the boy tightly against his chest. "Daddy!" sobbed Ethan, his face wet with tears and mud. Alexander stepped back, twisting his body to protect his son, and shouted, "Leah! To the car!" From behind, James shouted, "Alex! Behind you!" Alexander turned by reflex, but he wasn't fast enough. A figure hidden in the dark corner raised a weapon. The second shot rang out. The bullet grazed his shoulder, leaving a long trail of red. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go of Ethan. The seepage from his body and the rain merged into a red stream running down his neck. Leah saw everything. She screamed, "Uncle Alex!" Then, defying his orders, Leah broke free from Martha's grip, running directly through the rain. "Don't come back here!" roared Alexander. But the rain swallowed his voice. The girl ran toward him, her small figure caught between the darkness and the light. When the attacker raised his weapon again, Leah shrieked, throwing herself in front of Alexander. The bullet flew, hitting a nearby steel pillar, sending a blinding shower of sparks. The sound was like screaming metal. James returned fire. The detonation resonated loudly, and the assailant crumbled, his weapon falling from his hand, his eyes wide open. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the rain made the whole space suffocating. "Clear!" shouted one of James's men, moving forward to verify. "The last one is down," he said. Alexander sank to the ground, his back resting against a cold shipping container. He still held the two children tightly, Ethan sobbing on one side, Leah trembling on the other. His breathing was ragged, his right shoulder losing blood, but his eyes remained open, looking at his son to ensure he was alive. The rain fell harder. The tarps on the roof were torn by the wind, flapping wildly, revealing the rusted steel frame. The headlights of the police vehicles reflected in every raindrop, dancing on the stained ground. "Daddy, I'm scared," whimpered Ethan, his voice broken. Alexander hugged the boy tighter, pressing his cheek against his son's head, his breath hot from pain. "I know, but it's over now. No one will separate us again." Leah knelt beside him, her small hands gripping his jacket. "Uncle, you're bleeding. Uncle ... Then Alexander looked at her, forcing a weak smile, though his lips were turning blue from the cold.
Just a scratch. Both you and your brother are safe, and that is all that matters.
James ran over, signaling the police approaching the area. Medics, fast! Then he knelt, holding Alexander's shoulder. Don't try to talk anymore. I've called for help.
Stay calm. Do you hear me?
Alexander nodded weakly. Yes. His eyes looked outward, where the red and blue police lights reflected on the black water. In that flickering light, he saw the man he was 3 years ago, the one who only knew how to run away. But now he was holding the 2 children in the rain and the murky scene, and for the first time he didn't want to escape. Martha rushed over, pulling Leah into a tight hug, her tears mixing with the rain.
Oh my God, the children are safe!
Leah said nothing, just looked at Alexander. Leah. He looked up, his gaze weak but clear. You did very well, Leah, he said, his voice trembling but firm. You didn't run. You are like your mother. Very strong. The sound of the ambulance siren cut through the air. 2 paramedics ran over, crouching beside him. We need to stop the bleeding immediately. Alexander shook his head gently. Check the children first, he said. The doctor will take care of you, Uncle, sobbed Leah. But you have to stay with us, okay? He reached out, touching her cheek lightly. I promise. A strong gust of wind swept through, and the rain lashed sideways. James put his coat over Alexander's shoulders. Before we continue,
please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling?
If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. His voice tense. You made it, Alex. You didn't just save the children. You saved yourself. Alexander didn't answer.
He looked at the 2 children and nodded weakly, a silent thanks. Carla.
Far away on the opposite side of the dock, hidden in the shadows under a broken awning, a figure stood still. Carla clutched her phone tightly, the screen showing an unsent message. I'm sorry. She turned off the device, her tears mixing with the rain, and walked away. Her figure faded into the murky light, leaving behind the flashing red and blue lights, and the image of Alexander firmly holding the 2 children. The police surrounded the warehouse, the blue and red light reflecting on his face under the rain. Alexander hugged Leah and Ethan. His hands shook, but his eyes held a tranquility he hadn't known before. Dawn broke. The rain had softened to a light drizzle over the roof of St. Elena Hospital.
The sterile smell of disinfectant and the constant beep of the heart monitor created an atmosphere of eerie silence.
The kind that follows a great storm. Alexander lay in the hospital bed, his shoulder wrapped in white bandages. Every time he breathed, the wound ached, but he kept his eyes open. The windows were fogged with condensation, and outside the sky was still damp, the first weak light of morning filtering through the lingering raindrops. Beside him, Leah was slumped over his arm. Her hair was tangled and wet, her face still marked with traces of tears, but her small hand firmly held his, refusing to let go. Every time he moved slightly, that hand tightened as if she feared he might vanish. In the next bed, Ethan slept soundly. His breathing was even, his small chest rising and falling under the thin blanket. The boy murmured "Daddy" in his dreams, a sound that twisted Alexander's heart, a mixture of pain and deep relief. The room door opened softly. James entered, his coat still damp from the rain. He spoke quietly with the doctor on duty, his voice low and tense. Alexander caught a few fragmented words. Arrest warrant. Carla is still out there. When Leah woke up, she rubbed her eyes, lifting her head. Her voice hoarse. Uncle. Uncle. Does it hurt? Does it hurt? Alexander turned to her, his gaze tired but warm. Not really, no, he replied. A faint smile touched his lips. It's just that it's a bit late to learn how to be a father. Leah smiled softly, a small but genuine smile. She put her hand back over his, whispering, I think it's never too late. A soft knock sounded on the door. Martha entered, carrying a tray of food. "Oh my God, look at you." She shook her head, her voice trembling but soft. The morning news issued an arrest warrant for Carla. Leah froze, looking up, her eyes wide with confusion. "They are going to arrest my mother?" Alexander sat up slightly, his breath heavy. "Not because of you, Leah," he said slowly and clearly. "Because of the choices she made." The girl lowered her head, tears falling, but without sobs. I don't hate her," she whispered. "I do, I know," replied Alexander, his voice deeply muffled. "Sometimes pity is just a way of letting go." Silence filled the room. The soft rain fell outside the window. The heart monitor kept its constant beep like a peaceful heartbeat. After many years, Alexander no longer feared silence. He found life in it. The breathing of the two children, the wind slipping through the doorframe, and his own steady pulse.
Leah sat beside him, her eyes unusually bright. That look,
No longer of fear but of reliance, made him feel he had to become a better man. James approached, holding a file, his voice low. "Alex, I just got the news. This is going to be a very public trial. They need you to testify." Alexander nodded slowly, but firmly. "I will," he said, his eyes on the two children.
for her, for Ethan, and for myself.
Leah smiled, squeezing his hand. "I believe in you," she said. The weak sunlight filtered through the curtain, illuminating the three people sitting together. The man who had changed, and the two children, who had just emerged from a nightmare. In the hallway, a figure stood still. Her raincoat was tight, her face hidden under the brim of a hat. In the yellow light, her eyes shone with a cold look mixed with resentment. Carla stood there, watching through the glass window into the hospital room where Alexander and the two children held hands. The wind swept through the hallway, making the hem of her raincoat flutter. Carla's eyes darkened. Then she turned and walked away, her shoes striking steadily on the wet tile floor. In the room, Alexander looked up, a slight chill running through him, as if he sensed something unspoken. The wind swept through Riverton Plaza, spinning dust and dead leaves in blinding spirals. The sky was cloudy as if the sun refused to witness what was about to happen. The central courthouse was flooded with lights and lenses. Dozens of reporters crowded outside the doors, their signs reading "Trial of Tycoon Alexander Sterling" shining brightly in the camera flashes. Inside, the atmosphere was dense, and the courtroom was packed. Curious journalists and even those who once admired Alexander. But this time, he wasn't sitting in a seat of honor or a luxurious boardroom. He sat before the court, his shoulders still bandaged, his face pale, his eyes deeply sunken but lucid. The courtroom doors opened. Two police officers escorted Carla. She wore a pale gray prison jumpsuit, her hair disheveled, her makeup completely gone. Yet, as the flashes fired, she still managed to lift her head, a faint smile on her lips, the worn arrogance of someone who once thought she could control the world. In the back of the room, Leah sat next to Martha, her small hands gripping Ethan's tightly. Both looked toward the front row, where the man they had started calling Dad sat upright facing the woman who almost destroyed their family. The judge struck the gavel, his voice resonating. "The court is now in session." The prosecutor stood up, his voice clear. The evidence gathered from the defendant Carla Sterling's phone, the statements from the criminal group, and the video footage from the docks that rainy night, everything proves the defendant's conspiracy in the abduction of a child for the purpose of extortion. A murmur ran through the gallery. Camera shutters clicked repeatedly. James, sitting behind Alexander, leaned in and spoke quietly. "We have everything. She has no way to deny it." Alexander didn't answer. He looked at Carla. There was no anger left in his gaze, only weariness and a deep sadness. The prosecutor continued presenting the evidence. With every image, text message, recording, and warehouse camera footage, Carla lowered her head a little more. But when asked to speak, she looked up, her voice trembling, but clinging to a semblance of confidence. "I never intended to harm anyone," said Carla, looking around the room as if seeking sympathy. I just wanted to be loved.
I lost everything, and I just wanted to get a part of my life back.
A wave of whispers swept the room.
A reporter muttered, "Still acting."
Alexander stood up when asked to comment. His voice was deep, calm to the point of coldness.
You were loved, Carla, but you didn't know how to keep it. Love isn't something that can be bought, with threats or lies.
Carla let out a dry, hollow laugh that echoed in the gray and white room. You speak as if you've never deceived anyone, Alexander. Did you ever truly love me? To you, I was just a shadow to fill the void left by your late wife. Alexander remained silent, but his hands gripped the edge of the table. Leah saw it, her eyes filling with tears. She realized the woman who had once insulted her and abandoned her on the street was now just a torn soul. Stripped of kindness, stripped of love, stripped...
The prosecutor tapped the table lightly.
Defendant, please maintain order. We are not judging affection. We are judging a crime. In the back, Ethan rested his head on Martha's shoulder, asking quietly, Is she coming home? Leah shook her head, her hand trembling as she held her brother's. The judge read the verdict, and his voice resonated, every word falling heavily like a hammer on stone. Defendant Carla Sterling, found guilty of conspiracy to commit ... abduction, extortion, and child endangerment. The court sentences her to 8 years in prison. The courtroom was silent for a few seconds, then cameras began clicking furiously again. Carla stood still, her lips trembling, but a flash of poisonous hatred shone in her eyes. As the officers put their hands on her to escort her out, she turned to look at Alexander. You will never be happy, she said, her voice choked, almost a scream.
Alexander replied softly, but clearly.
I don't need happiness. I just need my children to be safe. That statement made Leah break down crying. Small sobs echoed in the corner of the room, causing many to turn around. Alexander turned, meeting the girl's wet gaze. He walked down, gently put a hand on Leah's shoulder and leaned in, his voice low. Sometimes people only learn the right thing after they've lost everything. Leah felt tears falling down her face.
I just hope she learns what real love is,
she whispered.
Reporters surrounded Alexander.
Microphones thrust toward him clamored with questions. Mr. Sterling, do you forgive her? Do you intend to seek full custody of both children? What do you think about your name being associated with this case? He offered only one sentence. There is no one left to blame.
There is only the right thing left to do.
James cleared a path for them to leave. The strong wind blew open Alexander's coat.
A piece of newspaper he was holding was snatched away, spinning several times before falling on the steps. On it, bold letters declared, "From sign to salvation." Alexander bent down, picked up the paper, his eyes fixed on that phrase. He gave a faint smile, not of pride, but because the right thing had finally been said, even at the cost of sacrifice, tears, and loss. Behind him, Leah and Ethan took his hands. The three walked through the windy courthouse plaza. Up above, the clouds remained intensely gray, but a thin ray of light slowly broke through the thick layer, like a promise of a different beginning. Quiet but lasting. The courthouse doors closed, the press still clamoring behind them as Alexander led the two children across the windswept plaza. The newspaper was caught by the wind again, flying far away, leaving its headline trembling against the gray sky. From sin to salvation. Snow covered the entire backyard. Flakes fell gently, as if afraid to disturb the silence of a winter in Riverton. Sterling Manor was now full of warm yellow light, coming from the windows, a light rarely seen here since the tragedy. Alexander sat on the wooden patio wrapped in a thick sweater, an old book resting on his lap, its pages unread. He looked at the garden where Leah ran around a stone bench and Ethan took wobbly steps, his arms outstretched for balance. The laughter of the two children echoed against the white snow, so pure it made him smile involuntarily. "Daddy! Daddy!" called Leah, her cheeks flushed from the cold.
Daddy!
She carried a steaming mug of hot chocolate, her hands trembling slightly as she offered it. I made it a little sweet, but I think you'll like it. Alexander took the mug, warmth spreading through his palms. He took a small sip. The sweetness mixed with the scent of cinnamon, just like her mother used to make. Thank you, he said softly, his voice deep but tender. Leah looked up, her eyes shining brightly. Do you miss Mom a lot? And he nodded, exhaling slowly, his breath turning into a thin plume of smoke dot in the cold air. Yes, but now I don't just miss her. I'm also grateful because she left me the two most precious things in the world. Leah didn't ask more. She simply sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. In the distance, Ethan laughed as he chased a red ball rolling over the snow, looking like a little ray of sun in the winter sky. Today, inside the living room, a new photograph hung prominently on the wall. Alexander, Leah, and Ethan on the day of the first charity festival for the foundation. Bright Eyes, an organization Alexander established after the trial, dedicated to abandoned, orphaned, or abused children. Beneath the image was a small plaque engraved with the words, "Happiness begins with daring to love again." Night fell. The wind whistled through the window frames, but the house remained warm. Leah sat at her desk, opening a small brown leather journal, a diary Alexander had given her for her 9th birthday. She wrote in small, neat handwriting. Today Dad smiled. Ethan said the words, "Daddy, I love you. I'm not afraid of thunder anymore." She put down the pen, smiled faintly, and got into bed. In the next room, Alexander leaned against the door, reading those words aloud in a low voice through the crack of light. Every sentence, every word felt like a needle stitching the broken pieces of his heart. After years of running, he realized the deepest wounds weren't on the body, but in the place no one could see, the heart. But now they were slowly healing. One morning, Alexander took the two children to the city cemetery. Snow covered the tombstones. White roses were neatly placed before Elena's grave. He knelt, clearing the snow from the headstone, and whispered, "I finally did the right thing that I couldn't do back then." Leah stood beside him, placing a small bouquet of flowers at the base of the grave, whispering, "I don't hate my stepmother anymore. Now I just feel pity for her." Alexander looked at his daughter, his eyes misted by the cold. Then he reached out and hugged Leah, and in that moment, he felt his old heart, once hardened and closed, beating again strong and warm, as it had been a long time ago. As they left the cemetery, the gray sky gave way to a thin ray of sunshine. Snow began to fall lightly. Ethan reached out to catch the flakes, laughing. "Snow tastes sweet, Daddy." Alexander laughed, a genuine prolonged sound making Leah laugh too this time. "Daddy." That afternoon they returned to the mansion. The light from inside spilled out golden and warm. Martha stood at the door with her hands clasped, her eyes watery. "This house," she murmured, "finally has laughter again." In the living room, Alexander sat at his desk, opened the foundation's planning notebook, and wrote the first line, "Bright Eyes Foundation for the Children Left Behind." He paused for a moment, looking out the window where Leah and Ethan played in the snow. Then he added, "No one is born to be forgotten. Every child deserves to be loved." When he put down the pen, the last rays of sun entered through the window, illuminating the 3 photographs on the wall. 3 different faces, all with a smile. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the scent of chocolate, warm wood, and Leah's soft giggles. These ordinary sounds were now, for Alexander, the greatest gifts of his life. Leah and Ethan slept on the sofa. The snow kept falling outside the window. Alexander tucked them both in, then sat in silence, watching the snow-covered garden, whispering, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." The light from the fireplace reflected in his eyes, warm, deep, and full of life. The sky of Riverton was bright after the nightly rain. The sun shone through a thin layer of clouds, reflecting in every drop still clinging to the wooden benches of the plaza. The leaves shone as if they were silver-plated.
In the central plaza, hundreds of people had gathered.
Elders, children, reporters, volunteers, all attending the spring fundraising festival for the foundation.
Bright eyes. Blue flags lined both sides of the path.
Children laughed, running around dessert stalls and game booths.
Amidst the lively scene, Alexander Sterling stood near the small stage, his hands tucked in his coat pockets, his posture simple but serene. The spring breeze gently ruffled his silver hair. Beside him was Ethan, now 5 years old, his eyes shining brightly, holding a blue balloon. Leah looked up at her father and asked softly, "Daddy."
Leah is scared.
Alexander leaned down, smiling faintly.
No, child. Your sister is much braver than I ever imagined.
On stage, Leah, now 11 years old, wore a simple white dress, her long hair gathered neatly. The light shining through the transparent canopy made her look as if she had stepped out of a memory both familiar and new. "Hello." Below, the crowd went silent as the host introduced her. "Let's welcome Leah Sterling, the youngest representative of the Bright Eyes Foundation."
Applause erupted, then subsided. Leah held the microphone, breathing deeply.
Her eyes landed on the front row where Alexander and Ethan sat. "Today.
Her voice resonated clear but full of emotion. 3 years ago, a man stopped his car in the pouring rain to help a little girl no one wanted.
That day, he didn't know he was saving himself too. The crowd held its breath. Only the sound of the wind flapping the stage canopy and the damp smell of earth remained. After the rain. "Today. Leah looked up, her eyes bright and glistening.
Today, I want to thank the man who taught me that kindness can save a person's entire life. The atmosphere was absolute silence.
Alexander lowered his head, his hands lightly clasped. A warmth swelled in his chest. His heart beat slowly and strongly. Some people in the crowd wiped away tears. But he remained silent, watching the daughter he almost lost. Now standing and speaking about faith and compassion to the world.
When Leah bowed to conclude her speech, applause exploded.
Hundreds of people stood up, cheers mixing with the music. Ethan clapped until his small hands turned red, shouting repeatedly, "Go, Leah! You're great!" Alexander smiled. The smile was genuine, no longer forced as before, but a smile full of pride and tranquility. He raised his hand to wipe the corner of his eye, then stood up, walking toward the stage after the ceremony. Leah ran and hugged him tightly. "Daddy, we did it!" Alexander leaned down and hugged her. He replied softly, "We didn't save anyone, Leah. You saved me." The girl looked up, smiling.
"You're wrong, Daddy. I just learned to love again from you, Daddy."
The laughter of the father and daughter mixed with the soft music spreading across the plaza. People around them stopped, watching them. 3 individuals who had weathered the storm, now standing together under the gentle sun of a spring day. In the afternoon, the crowd gradually dispersed. The spring rain began to fall again, fine and soft like a breath. Alexander put coats over the 2 children, then led them away from the plaza. They walked through the old streets, passing rows of trees still wet from rainwater. When they reached the familiar curve where it all began, Alexander stopped. The small road was covered by a faint mist. Long shadows from the trees stretched over the wet asphalt. Leah looked up, her gaze soft. "What would have happened... if you hadn't stopped the car that day?" He looked into the distance, smiling faintly. "Then I would have stopped in the next life." Leah laughed softly, her laugh as clear as a raindrop falling on a leaf. Ethan jumped around them, his small shoes splashing water, his laughter echoing down the street. Alexander watched the scene, a strange feeling surging in his heart.
Not sudden joy, but deep serenity.
The kind he had sought all his life. And he realized that peace didn't come from wealth, but from the moment
a person allows forgiveness for others and for themselves.
The 3 continued walking. The rain grew heavier, creating small circles on the road surface. The last light of the day reflected through the water, shining on Leah and Ethan's faces, making them glow as if edged in gold. "Daddy," said Leah, tilting her head slightly. It's raining again.
Alexander looked up at the pale gray sky, then smiled.
It's okay, honey. Because now the rain isn't scary anymore. He held Leah's hand,
his other hand holding Ethan's. The three walked through the soft rain,
their steps merging with the sound of the water slow and steady like the pulse of a reunited family.
They crossed a small bridge where rainwater flowed, shining like silver ribbons.
Leah looked up, her eyes bright.
I think Mom would be happy to see us like this now.
Alexander replied softly.
I think so too.
A spring breeze blew carrying the scent of flowers and wet earth. The rain thinned, and the last rays of sun filtered through, bathing the entire path in gold.
Alexander looked at the two children, then whispered like a promise to himself. From now on, come rain or shine, I won't leave you alone again.
Leah squeezed his hand.
Ethan laughed out loud, and they continued walking together, three figures blending into the fading light at the end of the street.
Behind them, the old sign for Riverton Central still held a few raindrops. A final drop fell, breaking on the stone pavement, reflecting in countless tiny rays of light like a quiet end to the journey of those who were once hurt but had now learned to love again.
And in the soft sound of the rain, Alexander's voice rose, calm as a prayer. Thank you for letting me stop at the right moment. The three figures, a father and two children, walked hand in hand under the spring rain.
Under a clearing sky, the journey from sin to salvation closed,
leaving behind only peace in a simple thing that every heart needs, faith and love. And that is our bedtime story for today. A journey from sin to salvation, from pain to love, from tears to a final peaceful smile.
How do you feel after listening to this story?
Which character made the biggest impression on you? Was it Alexander, the father who learned to love again? Or Leah, the little girl full of resilience and forgiveness? Or was there an action that touched your heart the most?
Throughout the narration, please share your thoughts in the comments section below so we can discuss what resonated with you.
What touched your heart?